Okay, time to visit an alternate universe. Time to visit the email inbox of your older male relative, let's call him your uncle, who watches Fox News all day. The one who makes you half love Thanksgiving dinner with your extended family and half dread it all year long because he is going to be there. In the alternate universe of your Fox News watching conservative uncle's email inbox, in that world of aggrieved, conservative, all capital letters paranoia, this is the biggest deal in the world right now. This is official surveillance camera footage shot inside the Board of Elections in Maricopa County, Arizona. Now, it's surveillance video, so it's a little herky-jerky, but you can clearly see people entering the facility, coming through the doors, and they're coming in there to drop off their ballots for the election. This county has a collection box set up. You see person after person coming through the doors and dropping off their ballots. But then, in this video, dun, 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 there's this guy. And your Fox News watching uncle is very upset by this guy right now. As you can see, the guy's wearing shorts and flip-flops and a T-shirt. The T-shirt's from a group called Citizens for a Better Arizona. Citizens for a Better Arizona is a group that says they're trying to increase Latino voter participation in that state. And in fact, the guy in this surveillance camera footage works for that group. But what you see in this footage that has your uncle so upset is that the dude is not just dropping off a ballot. He's not just there to cast a vote in the election. That guy is there to drop off a whole bunch of votes for the election. You can see him clearly in this footage. He doesn't just drop one ballot and then leave like everybody else. He stays longer because he's putting in ballot after ballot after ballot after ballot. Oh my God. Examiner.com, liberal activist caught on video stuffing hundreds of ballots. This one, all caps, red letters, you know it's good. Video! Left-wing activist caught stuffing ballot box in Arizona. Does this video show a Hispanic activist committing vote fraud? Hispanic, emphasis on panic. Glenn Beck's blog adds the damning red arrow to the still from the surveillance camera footage in case you can't see the human without it. Surveillance video apparently catches guy doing something at the ballot box that leaves Republican monitor stunned. The frenzy started at Arizona right-wing blogs. It spread from there into all the national right-wing blogs. And now, I guarantee you, your aforementioned conservative uncle is painting his Facebook wall with this story and with this damning surveillance camera footage as we speak. Did I mention that the guy in the video is clearly Hispanic? A few things to know about this. First, the timing. I know it's nice. The weather is always nice in Arizona. But this footage of the guy in flip-flops and shorts and a T-shirt was actually shot in August, when Arizona was having a primary election. This whole thing happened in August, but it's just being rolled out now by the conservative media a week and a half before our big national election in order to create a conveniently timed, scary feeling for gullible conservative people all over the country. Yeah, sure, down at your local precinct, you might be planning to just vote your one little vote. But Latinos like this guy, they're stuffing the ballot box with hundreds of ballots, blatantly stealing the elections. Be afraid, be aggrieved. So that's one thing to know about it, the timing. It happened months ago, but they're making it a story now, and it has turned into a huge story on the right. The other thing to know about this story is that the guy is not actually stealing the election. It is perfectly legal and totally normal and a long-standing practice in Arizona that it's okay to drop off other people's absentee ballots at the Board of Elections. You can even drop off multiple people's ballots at once. It's okay. And that fact of Arizona law has led to some hilarious journalistic-ish updating of some of the initial conservative freakout about this. So, for example, at the Glenn Beck blog, where they added the super scary, be afraid, damning red arrow pointing at the perpetrator, right, they've still got the headline about the surveillance video catching the guy doing something at the ballot box. And you can still read through 10 pretty breathless paragraphs about how a man was seen stuffing hundreds of ballots into the ballot box. The entire incident caught on surveillance video. They give an exact time for the crime. It was between 12:54 and 1:04. They quote the local Republican Party chairman saying, quote, "America used to be a nation of laws where one person had one vote. I'm sad to say, not anymore." So you get through 10 paragraphs of this terrible, breathless, damning reporting about this horrible ballot stuffing that has happened. And then, oh, look, you skip to the bottom. Editor's note, this post has been updated. Yvonne Reed, who's he? Go back, skip 11 paragraphs into the story. Turns out Yvonne Reed is the spokeswoman for the county elections department. She eventually gets a call from the Glenn Beck folks after they've posted their damning story. And unfortunately, she tells them, quote, people can bring in someone else's ballot. There's no law against bringing in ballots and placing them in the receptacle for early ballots. But still, leave the story up. Surveillance camera catches guy doing something. Red arrow. The crime of legally participating in the normal voting process while appearing to be Hispanic has blown up on the right this week like a dirty freaking bomb. And your uncle is not going to pass you the marshmallow yams at Thanksgiving this year until he gets a straight answer from you about what really happened in Maricopa County, because he saw the tape. So from the alternate universe of America's right-wing media, you should know that that is part one of what they rolled out this week. But it is a week and a half before the national election, and your paranoid conservative uncle's inbox does really need filling at this point in time. And so it's not just the blogs. The Fox News channel is also doing its part as well. The Fox News channel this week decided to invent their own blood-curdling tale of people legally voting, except their blood-curdling tale is set not in Arizona, but in Colorado.
Breaking tonight, with 2 weeks to the midterms, we are getting warnings that a new law has opened the door to possible voter fraud in a critical Senate race that could decide the balance of power in Congress. It was roughly 16 months ago when the Democratic governor of Colorado signed a first-of-its-kind new election law, a set of rules that literally allows residents to print ballots from their home computers, then encourages them to turn ballots over to collectors in what appears to be an effort to do away with traditional polling places. What could go wrong?
What could go wrong? It sounds terrible. That's because they made it up, so it would sound terrible. Local news stations in Colorado have been correcting the Fox News channel ever since they started making up this story this week. Here's KUSA in Colorado trying to calm down their viewers. Quote, Tuesday's episode of Fox News host Megyn Kelly's program incorrectly told viewers that Colorado voters are now able to print ballots using their home computers and vote by turning them in. The segment prompted several confused viewers to reach out to 9 News to learn more. The claim that Colorado law allows for home printed ballots is simply false. Most Colorado voters cannot print a ballot on their home printer and use it to vote. There's only one category of Colorado voters who can, those serving in the military. That system has absolutely nothing to do with Colorado's new election law. It was in place beforehand. So Colorado has a vote-by-mail system this year, which other states have too. Fox has now decided that in the state of Colorado, that's terrifying, even if it doesn't terrify them anywhere else in the country. And the long-standing way that Colorado military voters have always voted, that's also, on Fox News, now a Democratic plot to steal the election. And it's something brand new, even though it's only for military voters and it's not new at all. But the election is a week and a half away, and your uncle needs reading material. Conservative media needs the Republican base to get really alarmed that there might be voting going on out there. Some of it by people who appear to be Latino fraud. And some of it in places that have started to frequently vote for Democrats. Fraud. So it's started now on the right-wing blogs, on Fox News, on talk radio. This is what the next week and a half is going to be like heading into the election, right? A frenzy of made-up stories about stuff that they're hoping people will think seems illegal about potential Democrats voting in the upcoming election. Now, to be fair, the Republican Party proper is not responsible for fringy right-wing blogs and the stuff that they make up on the Fox News channel and your uncle and his Where's the Birth Certificate t-shirt, right? I mean, that is what's going on the right, but you can't expect the Republican Party to answer for all of that, just as you don't expect the Democratic Party to answer for the whole left. I mean, in mainstream Republican politics, at least, you sort of expect a different tone. You expect them at this point, a week and a half out, to be talking about what they have to offer the electorate. So, like, take their great hope, New Jersey Republican Governor Chris Christie, head of the Republican Governors Association, so he's in charge of electing Republican governors. He's also setting the stage for his own widely anticipated run for president. Well, here's Chris Christie speaking this week to the U.S. Chamber of Commerce about how important this election is if Republicans have any hope of winning back the White House in 2016.
If all you're concerned about is 2016, let me suggest this to you, that if you have any chance of electing a Republican president, there's a bunch of things we need to do But the first is to have a good bench of Republican candidates. And I am convinced that the next president of the United States is going to be a governor. And it needs to be.
Guess who's a governor? Chris Christie building himself up as a potential 2016 candidate. He says that electing Republican governors now this year will also help the party put up a good slate of candidates to run in 2016. So he says in order to win the White House, the first thing Republicans need is a good bench of candidates for the presidential field. That's the first thing they need in order to get a Republican in the White House. But now here's the second thing they need.
Secondly, what would you rather have if you were a Republican candidate and the nominee for president? Would you rather have Rick Scott in Florida overseeing the voting mechanism or Charlie Crist? Would you rather have Scott Walker in Wisconsin overseeing the voting mechanism, or would you rather have Mary Burke? Who would you rather have in Ohio? John Kasich or Ed Fitzgerald? Fact is, if you're just a pragmatist and you don't really care about what happens in the states, you're going to care about who's running those states in November of 2016. And what kind of political apparatus they set up and what kind of governmental apparatus they set up.
Wow. You know, in theory, who's in control, which party's in control of a governmental apparatus in a state shouldn't be a factor in who is likely to win an election in that state. Right? Gaining partisan control of the voting mechanism isn't really supposed to be what you admit is your plan for winning elections in those places where you control who counts the ballots. When the Chris Christie remarks this week were first reported in the Bergen Record in New Jersey, the usually mild-mannered, non-controversial political scientist Norm Ornstein linked to Christie's remark and paraphrased them this way, quote, "How can we cheat on vote counts if we don't control the governorships?" After breaking the news about these comments this week, the Bergen Record itself editorialized about them like this, quote, "The governor seems to suggest that control of the voting mechanism by a Republican governor can help a Republican candidate." The paper calls the governor's comments, quote, "disturbing," and says, quote, "Christie's point can only be interpreted one way. Republican candidates would do better in elections running in states with Republican governors at the helm." That editorial appeared yesterday morning. Yesterday afternoon, Governor Christie did another appearance. He was asked about what he said and what he meant. He then gave a clarification, which actually makes the whole thing much, much worse. This was his clarification, quote, "Everybody read too much into that. You know who gets to appoint people, who gets to decide what in part the rules are. I would much rather have Republican governors counting those votes when we run in 2016 as Republicans than I would have Democrats. Listen, I'm a Republican. I'm going to run as a Republican. I want Republicans counting the votes when I'm running." Usually it's the conservative media that's willing to actually say stuff that radical. That's willing to talk about taking over the vote counting so when the votes are counted, Republicans will win. I mean, usually that's the crazy stuff coming from the conservative media, and official Republicans are careful to avoid language like that. This year, though, you can take those goalposts and run downfield with them, because this year, even the mainstream GOP is saying they need Republicans to win governorship so they'll control the vote counting to ensure a Republican presidential candidate wins the count. I mean, in order to find any space at all to the right of that, we've got to have conservative media pointing and screaming at people who commit the crime of voting while Latino, or in the case of Fox News, making up scandalous voting laws that don't exist and telling their primetime viewers that what they just made up is how Democrats are stealing the election. This is how they're stoking their base for the elections this year, when it looks like the Republicans are going to do well. If the Democrats end up doing well in this election, imagine what they're going to make up then. This is nuts this year. Tell your uncle I said so.